Hi, Grace family. As the leadership and I have looked back over this past year to see how God has been at work, three words have kind of bubbled up to the surface. The first of those is connection. The Lord has brought us out of the pandemic and back into face-to-face life with one another through relationships, new and old relationships with one another, through Sunday worship together, community groups, and retreats. Simply put, it feels like we are a church again, and that's very exciting, very welcome news. The second word is spaciousness. Our new denominational home has brought us into a place where we have a tailwind and the freedom to become the congregation that God is forming us into. One of the many ways that we have benefited from that this year is that we have had room to explore greater possibilities for women serving in our congregation. And the third word to describe the Lord's work in our congregation is refuge. By the Lord's goodness, Grace is a hospital for the wounded and the broken. It is a place where people can come to find shelter. In addition, we are continuing to grow in our relationships with people and organizations in the city that are serving the marginalized and the hurting. The fingerprints of God are all over this congregation. By the Lord's grace, a strong and sturdy foundation has been laid and a great team has been assembled. We are beginning to bloom as a congregation. There is new life emerging from the vine, and we can see more buds forming. In light of this, as we look forward to the next ministry year beginning in the fall, where do we sense that the Lord is leading us? The wooden structures in this picture are trellises. A wise farmer, a wise gardener builds trellises to foster and support healthy growth. We believe that our next year will be about building trellises to support the growth that God is producing. This growth is not primarily about numbers. It is about deepening our lives with God in meaningful ways. But at the same time, there are a number of new folks being drawn to Grace. And I believe that one of the reasons they are being drawn is because of the oasis of the goodness of God that is tangible in our midst. And that is a good thing that people are being drawn to Him in that way. And we want to steward both aspects of this growth well. I love the trellis metaphor because it denotes intentionality. We believe that we need to be engaged in fostering and supporting this new life. But at the same time, a trellis is dependent upon God. As Paul says in Corinthians, it is the Lord who brings the growth, not us. We water, we plant, we build trellises, the Lord brings the growth. Now, I'm going to ask your forgiveness for the next slide. It's a little bit corporate, and you know that's not the way we operate, but I think it does a good job of capturing these three interlocking emphases of the upcoming ministry year. The first is communion with God. We begin not with some sort of anxious trying to find the Lord, but with the life-giving reality that God is already at work in each of us. We can exhale. And believing that He is graciously inviting each of us to take the next step towards Him. Our fall sermon series will be centered on our Sunday worship. Why do we worship in the way that we do? It may be familiar to some of you, it may be strange to some of you. We're going to dive into that. And also, how can we lean into a more holistic and embodied way of worship that the Anglican tradition provides us? Now, because our sermon series is more topical than usual, our adult Christian formation class will zero in on one book of the Bible. We will be spending the entire year in Christian formation in the Gospel of Mark. And Jamie has been putting together an amazing teaching team, and I think it'll be a delight for us. Grace Kids is also pivoting to more intentionally prepare our little ones to become worshipers. And finally, in an effort to foster a greater corporate experience of the image of God reflected in and through each of us, we want to nurture greater ethnic and cultural diversity in our congregation. as well as, God willing, reach a congregational decision on women in ministry leadership later this fall. Second, in addition to communion with God, we want to grow in our connection with each other. What God has been forming this past year has been great, but we want it to grow. We are praying for several new community groups to form, to provide folks with a place to connect with others. Our community groups will be tracking with our adult Christian formation class through the Gospel of Mark. What does discipleship, what does a life of communion with Jesus and a life of following him look like? And I think this will provide a depth of biblical riches for all of us. We also look forward to continue seeing the emergence of growth groups. These are more intentional groups of 3 men or 3 women who pledge to walk together for the year and support one another in their walk with the Lord. Our youth group is hoping to add a midweek gathering this upcoming year, as well as empower and form a youth leadership team so they can help share in the leadership and the vision of our youth group. Grace Kids will continue its Christian formation classes, and we will add a worship preparation class that will take place during Sunday worship. Finally, as we look to the new year, we want to continue to grow servants. It has been said that the ministry of any church is the sum total of the ministry of its members. And God has brought so many amazing people to our church. I marvel at this all the time. Our desire is to help people recognize and step into the gifts that God has given them, and then come alongside of them as they are built up, empowered, and released to serve in our congregation, in our city, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, and in our workplaces. Our Serving the City ministry is going to continue the good work it has started. We are considering plans to add immigrant care as one of our areas of emphasis this year, and begin to discern more direct involvement in providing housing in the city. We also hope to add new members to both our congregation. Many of you have asked about that. When will we have the next membership batch of folks coming through? Lord willing, that'll happen this fall. And we also want to add new members to our vestry, our governing board. In short, there is an abundance of goodness afoot for our congregation. And let me close with this. One of my friends often says, "Watch and wonder." And that is my invitation to each of us. As we prayerfully move forward together, I want us to watch. I want us to look and to be attentive to seeing the Lord at work in our midst, and then wonder and marvel as he continues to do his work. Our prayer is simply this: Jesus, make your name great.